My name is Robert Gordon. I'm the president of the Chevy Chase Citizens Association, and I want to welcome you to a very interesting and exciting webinar this evening. Uh, Over the last few months, we've been watching the Chevy Chase listserv, and we found that a lot of people are very interested in what to do in the case of an emergency. So we put together a program with the Northwest Neighbors Village to help inform us about those things that should be prepared to do in case of an emergency. Two people were really instrumental in making this happen. One of them is Karen Zuckerstein, who is a very hardworking member of Northwest Neighbors Village, and of course Stephanie Chong, the executive director of NNV, who will be your moderator this evening. She'll introduce our guests this evening. We have a very prestigious panel, and I'm going to leave you in Stephanie's good, competent hands. So thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to hearing from you as the evening progresses.
Thank you, Robert, and welcome everybody to this evening. We're very excited to partner with CCCA again for our annual March program to bring important, informative programming to our neighbors. For those of you who do not know about us, we are Northwest Neighbors Village. We provide assistance and volunteer support that enables older adults to thrive as they age in our community by offering a robust network of resources and opportunities. I encourage you to learn more and to join us at some of our free programming that we're now offering virtually at www.nnvdc.org. This evening, we have three wonderful presenters who will help us to prepare for the unexpected. And we certainly know that 2020 has really proved to us that preparing for the unexpected is quite important. Today, we have with us Fire and EMS Chief John A. Donnelly, Sr. He has led the 2,100 member DC Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department since December 2020. Fire and EMS Chief John A. Donnelly Sr. started his career with DC Fire and EMS in 1992. And over the course of his career, he has served in a variety of roles, including Division Commander of Special Operations, Homeland Security, and Apparatus Division. Chief Donnelly serves on numerous committees supporting regional and national preparedness, including the International Association of Fire Chiefs, Terrorism, and Homeland Security Committee, and the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Fire Chiefs Committee. Fire Chief Edward G., also known as Ned Sherburne, has been a member of the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad since 1978. He has led the predominantly volunteer department for 12 years. Chief Sherburne serves in the Montgomery County Fire Rescue Command structure at the Duty Operations Chief level, maintains certification as a Maryland National Registry EMT paramedic, and is an active MCFRS command officer. Chief Sherburne is also experienced in medical support of law enforcement operations, emergency preparedness, and continuity planning. Chief Sherburne commands a dedicated group of volunteer officers who manage the 150 active volunteer members. And lastly, we have Samantha Nolan, a neighbor that I'm sure most of you know. She is CERT and Neighborhood Corps trained and a member of the Neighborhood Corps Council for the District of Columbia. In this position, she works with city officials to develop emergency preparedness programs citywide. She developed a portable to-go kit for residents to use in case of an emergency evacuation. She serves as the MPD Citywide Neighborhood Watch and Crime Prevention Trainer and has trained more than 4,000 block captains citywide. She is a member of the Chief of Police Citizens Advisory Council and the Chair Emerita of the 2nd District MPD Citizens Advisory Council. She has been an active member of the Chevy Chase Citizens Association for more than 20 years and served as the association's president from 2014 to 2016. I ask you to welcome our distinguished guests, and I'm going to turn it over to John.
And I even remembered to unmute before I started talking for a change. Um, Hi, I'm Chief Donnelly from DC Fire and EMS. I'm going to go ahead and take the hat off now, so I'm not a distraction, but I would like to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day, and hopefully you are all celebrating safely tonight after the meeting. I lead a very diverse department with a lot of responsibilities across the city. They run the gamut from fire and EMS calls to some preventive medicine that we do in support of the community for things like COVID testing, to fire inspections, to responding to the insurrection on January 6th. We run from one end to the other. And I like to tell you that we are very prepared for that. Our system has seen tremendous growth over the last 10 or 15 years, in not only in terms of call volume, but in terms of investment from the city. And I would characterize us as one of the busiest per capita systems in the country. It really depends on how you look at that, but we are always at the top of that for the amount of residents we have and the amount of calls, which means people need us and they call us a lot. But we are also focused on quality of care more than volume. So we do a lot of quality assurance. We have a large team that looks at what we're doing all the time and is making adjustments. And one of those things that you may hear about, we've been out talking, I'm not sure if we've talked to your group over the last couple of years, but our Right Care Right Now program, 35 years ago, we or a little bit more than that really in the area, we started telling everybody to call 911 if you needed something. And that's been very successful. But now we need you to call 911 for emergencies, and we need to help you get connected to other things so that the emergency systems are there for that. So right now, if you call 911 as part of your triage, if it's not triaged as an immediately life-threatening problem as determined by the call taker based on the questions they have, you may end up talking to one of our nurses who can help you with self-care, getting clinic appointments, and developing long-term healthcare relationships if you don't already have them. And sometimes they may not even send us to the scene. If you need transportation to the hospital, you may be able to go via a taxi that we set up, or like a Uber or whatever the other ones are, blanking on that. And or AMR, which is our third-party provider ambulances. They're the sort of red, white, and blue ambulances you see around. But rest assured, if you have a life-threatening emergency, the 911 system is coming and coming right away. We do a very good job meeting our response times. We're always looking to get better, always need resources for that. And some of that is just getting the right calls made to 911 so we can get there. So there's a lot of that. And I think if you watch the news, if you watch around the country based on the phone calls I get from my peers across the country about things that we are doing, it's amazing. Just in this last week, we've saved a 13-month-old from a very scary cardiac arrest situation. These are very rare, but I think it speaks to the high quality of care that our providers can give, the relationships that we've developed with our hospitals. So that is really good. The other thing is every morning I listen to the radio. Between 5:30 and 7, we run a number of CPR calls. It's a normal time of the morning for that type of thing. Almost every day, I hear the units transporting one of those people to the hospital with a return of spontaneous circulation. That is a great save to get somebody to the hospital where they can go undergo surgeries in order to fix the underlying problem. About one of those people a week walk out of the hospital. In addition to the CPR things, which are high, we also have done a great job of identifying strokes early, getting people into stroke centers so that they can get those cleaned up. So I think those are big things that you need to know about that are going on in your system. There's two things from your questions I'd really like to talk about. I know Samantha is going to give you great stuff on the 72 hours and the care kit, but from personal experience, a contact list, if you need it, if you have people that need to be contacted on your fridge is something, even with my mother when she was sick and I came to the house, I couldn't get in her phone, right? She was gone and I needed to call people. And if she hadn't had that list on her phone, my own mom, right? If she hadn't had that on her own refrigerator, I'd have struggled to do it. And I have since then I've watched law enforcement generally makes the contacts, and they do look there for that. So that I think that's an important thing. The other thing, I can't see anybody here, but generally I think our demographics on the calls tend to skew a little older. So I want to talk about fire safety. In the District of Columbia, 50% on average of our fire deaths are senior citizens. It is one of the most important things to me to change during my tenure as fire chief. So we need, if you don't have smoke detectors in your house, if you want a home safety inspection, if you call 311, we'll come out. We'll do that for you. We'll do that in a COVID safe manner. And let me tell you, it's not all about smoke detectors. 50% of the people that die in the District of Columbia have working smoke detectors in their homes. It's because they have other challenges, or if you're mobility limited, if you're cooking and your clothes catch fire, those types of things, if you're using extension cords. So we want the fires to stop. That's why we need to do home safety inspections. Please call us, let us know, or ask us to come out. We'll come to your home, we'll do the inspection, and we'll help you however you need it. So that is what I have for today. And when everybody's done talking, I'll be glad to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Donnelly. I wanted to mention, you talked about putting emergency contact information on your refrigerator. We have these things called a file of life. It's a magnet you put on your refrigerator. I know, having done geriatric social work, that the EMS comes out and they look for this on the refrigerator. It's a great document. You can include all of this emergency information, doctor's information, medical information, but it's kept private because it's sealed in this envelope. So if anybody's interested, I will put our information on how to contact me. We do have some through the village. We'd be happy to share that with our neighbors. And I'll turn it over to Chief Sherburne. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Good. Okay. I can also operate the mute button. So I want to thank everybody for coming on St. Patrick's Day. My name's Ned Sherburne. I'm the chief of the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad. I was feeling a little guilty because we haven't updated our website a while, because I actually am going on about 22 years as chief. I did, although I live in Bethesda now, I did grow up in DC. I originally joined the rescue squad because it was the only volunteer service that actually came to the district. Although I don't live here anymore, I have deep commitments to the district. My mom ran for city council in Ward 3 right after the home rule charter change. And possibly someday I may move back down there in retirement. I'm still thinking about that. But this is not about the past. I just raised that just because I do have deep connections to DC, and I like the city. But BCC has provided ambulance service to Upper Northwest for almost 80 years. Historically, we had a very strong need and a very strong support base. The services are provided under a memorandum of understanding between DC Fire and EMS. I was actually the signatory for BCC to the current agreement with one of Chief Donnelly's predecessors. What that agreement allows us to do is, when a citizen calls 301-652-1000, which is our number, it allows us to send a basic life support ambulance to DC for the call. We do not, on a routine basis, provide paramedic service as under the terms of the memorandum of understanding. Basic life support is, oxygen, splints, epinephrine for an allergic reaction, but it is not paramedic level care. What happens when a caller calls our number, we simultaneously call DC and advise DC Office of Unified Communications of the call, and DC, based on their protocols, will duplicate a dispatch sometimes. In other cases, our unit will go by themselves, but that decision is made, by the DC dispatchers. We transport to a hospital of the patient's choice with some qualifications. I know there's been some miscommunication about rumors that we won't transport to DC. That's absolutely incorrect. In the post-COVID era, hospital choices are managed much more closely than they were prior to COVID, both for DC units and for us. So sometimes we are directed to where we need to go based on COVID-related protocols, but we do try and honor the hospital of the patient's choice. Might be a DC hospital from McKinley Street, or a lot of Upper Northwest residents are transported to Walter Reed. We also, which is now in Bethesda, we also transport there, as we can. One thing that does sometimes impact our transport services is, as I said, we do not provide paramedic service in DC. So if a person is in a condition or a level of extremis that requires paramedic service, that means they will almost always be transported in a DC unit, likely not a BCC unit. If anybody has more specific questions, we have a lot of information on our website. That's www.bccrs, as in Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad, BCCRS.org. I'm also very interested in hearing feedback from residents about service concerns or suggestions they have about service, and we open we have an email mailbox, feedback, FEEDBACK, spelled like it sounds, feedback@bccrs.org. The one thing I want to mention in terms of our service is we have been seeing a linear decline in requests for service. I've been doing this a long time. As I said, I have a long background in DC. I have seen an improvement in DC service, over the years, and I think, Chief Donnelly and his predecessors can be congratulated for changes they've made in the system. And one of the questions that we're asking internally in our organization is, what is our future going to be, and trying to integrate, and we're already integrated, to some degree with DC, but integrating, in a more significant fashion, because when I say, if I look at a chart here and I go back as far as 2003, we were running about 1,400 calls a year in DC. In 2020, that dropped to 381. So there's quite a difference, and that really has us, looking at our service. There have also been changes in our system that we're our home system in Montgomery County, because we are part of the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service as well. And that there have been legislative changes which now require any new memorandums of understanding to be approved by our elected officials in Maryland, as well as approved by folks in DC. So, we really are starting the process of looking at, what is best for DC citizens. But I want to go back to what I said a couple minutes ago, and that is that if somebody calls today, there's no change. We will service folks, but we are really looking to, this is a 20-year-old memorandum of understanding that we're operating under, and we're really looking to start asking questions about, what does a new relationship look like, because it's time to revisit this, I think. In terms of specific advice I would give to people, I think, the number one thing is that is just expect that it can happen to you, so you should be prepared. Because most people, really don't think that an emergency is going to happen to them, and they don't act as if they would. So, wear your mask, social distance, follow all of the the current, protections, have a kit. The file of life thing is a great example, but, have a go bag if you, just quick change of clothes, any identification that you might need, and so on, and look at hospital websites, because hospital policies about what you can take, who can visit you, all those things are changing dramatically with COVID. They have been relaxing some regulations recently, but there's still a lot of restrictions, and it does vary significantly from what I've seen from hospital to hospital. So, stay up on those kind of things. But, BCC wants to be of assistance however we can. And I would open it up to questions.
Wonderful. Thank you both. There are some questions in the chat, so I will go through these sort of in order. The first question is actually to Chief Donnelly. In the triage that you speak of, is one of the options to route mental health intervention team to avoid someone with mental health crisis encountering armed police?
So that is something that is currently being worked on. The challenge with the mental health intervention teams is they're not a 24-hour service. So how we can route that in and where the capacity for that actually lies is a little different. So not yet, but it is something we're working on. I think when we look at in a larger view, and I'm going to expand a little bit because I think it's an important topic as we talk about what the role of law enforcement is in the community and how some of that gets tied in. It's important to remember that what many of the health crises or mental health crises that we get calls on are people that are in extremis or in a really bad situation. What we need is to be able to help them at the beginning, long before that, get them into care, help them maintain their care, and get places in the community that they can get that care. And that's in every community where it's going on. So I know you are an influential group, right? You have a lot of care and passion. And I'd like you to think about the beginning of the healthcare problem before we think about the very end when somebody is, running up and down the street naked, punching people. That's a very hard situation to deal with. If you send a fire truck by itself, there's not a lot we can do. If you send, or an ambulance by itself, if you send law enforcement, they only have a few options, and they will try to talk them through it. But it's when people are getting hurt, it's very hard to deal with. So let's look at the front end of that.
Thank you. And can you just clarify on the right care right now? Do residents still call 911 and then the operator points them in the right direction, or do the residents have to call? They don't have to call a different number.
Nope, we're a single point of entry at this point. Depending on how this goes, about 10% of our calls each day, somewhere between 30 and 60, depending on the day, are diverted into the nurse, to that nurse right now. So it's 911. If that number goes up, we may do some different education, but 911 for now.
Thank you for clarifying that. There's also a question or a comment and question. For longtime residents, we remember a history of long response time by 911. And I think Chief Sherburne was talking about this earlier. Is this history behind us? What are the response times now?
So you can track our response times at fems.dc.gov. That's our website. We have performance management up there. They're probably running a quarter behind. We report them every quarter. Our averages are within a few seconds of the national standards for first response and for paramedic, one paramedic on the scene, two paramedics on the scene, things like that. Occasionally there are some outliers, but I would say that the experiences of the past are well behind you.
That's great to hear. And I also wanted to share, we've had some of our members have emergencies where the the EMS got there and they couldn't get into the house because there was an emergency where the individual couldn't answer the door. And I just wanted to put a plug because I know DC Fire and EMS works with a group called Lockbox.
Knox, K-N-O-X.
Oh, KNOX. Okay, I'm going to put it in the chat because we actually wrote an article about it and how to sign up for it. So I'll put it in the chat if you want to read more about it. It's a peace of mind, even if somebody has a key to your house, if they're on vacation when an emergency happens, or when the EMS comes, they might not know that your neighbor 2 doors down has the key. So it's an extra layer of security so that you don't end up with having to repair the door. And I know that's a very last resort. I've been in situations almost begging you guys to knock down the door, and we had to exhaust other options first. So is there anything you'd like to add to that, Chief Donnelly, besides the fact that it exists?
So actually, you raised a question for me that I'm going to have to follow up on. I wasn't aware that Knox boxes were available for use on private homes. So I'll follow up on that and make sure we're all aware of that.
Okay. Okay.
But you're right, it is a last resort, and those are tricky situations, right? If we're on the phone with somebody and we know they're in the house, it's much easier to deal with. A lot of times, you're never 100% sure, and it is dangerous and scary to go into a house like that. Sometimes, so we've had some very negative experiences around the region with that. So it's a tough situation, and the Knox thing would definitely help. We use knock boxes on multifamily dwellings and apartments and commercial buildings all the time. So if they're on houses, I'll make sure our people are aware.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Another question in the chat. Is there, for example, if somebody had an eye injury, do you have info on what ERs have specialists there, or do they just go to the first hospital that has availability?
So yes, we have info on specialists, but sometimes it's going to be based on what the load is in the emergency rooms at the time. We manage our loads in coordination with the hospitals across the district. We have a single point of coordination that directs people to different hospitals. The specialties in a lot of cases come to open cardiac beds, the stroke centers, things like that. Eye injuries are not as emergent most of the time, but yes, we're aware.
Thank you. And Ned, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, I think you might be muted.
Actually, I think I actually was unmuted and then I turned it on by accident. So I would just add that any kind of complicated situation is a great opportunity for a hospital consult, and that's normally how we handle it. There's a couple of specialties where the surgeons are actually the limiting factor, and if the one guy is working at the hospital center today, or he's at Suburban, or he's in Baltimore, he's the guy that the patient needs, and it really depends on where the physician is. And there's a couple of, and eyes are one of those. But I just would emphasize that hospital consultation is how those complicated decisions are made, so that it's actually an ED physician, helping you make this decision, not solely just us. And I would just say that one of the strong beliefs I've developed over the years is one of the most consequential things that we do for a patient is getting them to the right hospital, because that can really make a big difference in care. And there are times when we realize what the right hospital is and the family doesn't, and that sometimes is a difficult situation. But I would just say that DC and BCC EMS providers are very experienced in getting people to the right hospital, and that's a key thing we do.
Thank you. There's one really long question in the chat that I'm going to get to because it has a series of questions, and I'll leave that to the end. I'll go to this one question. This is directed to Chief Donnelly. There's an incident almost every day in apartment buildings on Connecticut Avenue. do you always send 2 or more emergency vehicles?
So what we send is based on what the caller is reporting and how they're answering the questions, and then what resources are where at the time of need. So if it is a minor medical emergency and the closest ambulance is there, they may get that. They may get an AMR unit by itself. It may be classified as something like a chest pains with trouble breathing that gets a larger response to get 2 paramedics to the scene right away. And then we find that the call is a little less and we downgrade it, which brings in a non-emergency type transport unit like the AMR unit. So you'll see 3 or 4 truck units there at that time, including the supervisor. So it's based on what the people say, where the resources are at the time, and it's all designed to get the person the care they need, the right care, really, in a timely manner.
Thank you. And it appears when there's an emergency that the fire squad seems to get there faster than everyone else. Can you elaborate on why that is?
But it depends on where we are, time of day. Generally, the fire trucks in the city are closer to the firehouses. So there's usually a fire truck closer to a scene than you get with the ambulances, which are traveling back and forth to the hospitals. That being said, when you see DC Fire and EMS responding now, they're being dispatched for calls that are generally higher priority. So because they're higher priority, the quicker response is needed. In the past, you would go to everything. Now with us using the nurse triage line and AMR as a direct dispatch, you get, or soon to be direct dispatch, they're not there yet, or the Uber vehicles. What you're getting when you see us is we want, somebody that needs to be a paramedic there as soon as possible so that they can do life-saving maneuvers or procedures. So I think that's what you're seeing. It is a bit of an evolution from the past, but it looks the same.
And for some older adults have called 911 because they've fallen and needed help to get up, but don't necessarily need hospitalization after that. What are your recommendations on that? How should one go about that kind of emergency?
So if you call 911, we will send a unit. Usually we don't send a transport unit to those. We send a fire truck to help the person get back in bed. We'll also, when that happens, do a patient assessment to find out what really caused them to fall. Just the other night, we had one of those where somebody called. They were pretty adamant. They just wanted help getting in bed. Our crews assessed the person. They had a pulse rate of 20, went to the hospital, ended up with a pacemaker, really saved their life. So we're gonna, if we come, we're gonna ask the questions and we're there to help. I'd like just to remind you of that.
Thank you. And Chief Sherburne, do you want to add anything from BCC's perspective?
No, we do also do a few service calls for lift assists in DC as well. Because we're only using transport units, we're going to send an ambulance. But I think, really the response is the same, is that we're always very concerned about, why did they fall? And, if there was an obvious, piece of carpet that was damaged or something and they tripped on it and they didn't hurt themselves, that's less concerning than the person who we don't know why they fell for exactly the reason that Chief Donnelly just reported. But we're always going to check and make sure that hopefully, we don't leave somebody at home that has an occult medical problem.
Mm-hmm. And on that line, if somebody were to have their medical information in one place, does that make your job easier when you're doing this assessment?
I mean, honestly, in a service call, maybe not, because they're probably conscious and they can maybe report their own history. But that is absolutely critical in any situation where a person is altered. Their level of consciousness is is not normal, and they can't be their own historian. So
it's always nice to confirm.
Yeah,
absolutely. One question here is, in a medical emergency, can I request a specific hospital or is it up to you?
So
I'll go first, Nick.
in our case, well, in our case, you can request the hospital. We are going to apply medical protocols to that. For example, if somebody wants to go to a hospital that we just got information that their, CAT scanner is down or their MRI is down, and we think they may have a head bleed or a stroke or something, we're going to do our best to override that. But we do try and honor requests. But again, in the era of COVID, in DC, the liaison officer or our hospital routing through our EMS officers, if we use a Montgomery County hospital, really has limited our choice of, sometimes we have to really work with people to make sure they're going to the hospital that's going to be able to serve them.
So I think for DC, the answer is we're going to use our emergency our liaison officer that has a vision on what's going on in all the hospitals and is able to communicate with them to make the right decisions for all the reasons that Ned articulated there. We will do our best to honor your request during that as well. If there's some reason that you'd rather go to Sibley than a hospital center, or even if you would like to go out of the city, we will go out of the city. But we really need to work with our liaison officers. That's part of our arrangement with the healthcare system in the district, so that we're not overloading the hospitals and we're not impacting the hospital's ability to deliver care.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go in this one attendee has a lot of questions. But it starts out with, I want to express my profound respect and thanks for the work you all do, especially this past year. Mine is a family full of doctors, paramedics, and first responders, except for me. And I know firsthand how important your work is. I do have some concerns and questions about DC's limitations on BCCRS's services, given that the more services we have, the better off we all are. There are a number of questions here. The first question is, why is BCCRS limited to basic life support? Why would it be a problem for BCCRS to provide full services to DC residents? That's the first question.
So Ned, you were around at the beginning of that when it was formed. I'm not sure what the.
So I have to tell you, I think the original thinking in the MOAs are really not applicable any longer, and I think there are complicated answers to that. But I think one of the issues, and I know this is difficult, but one of the issues that we really have to work out in the future are, with the changes that have occurred in DC, what's our best current response, and honoring the fact that we have responsibilities in Montgomery County as well as DC. Under the current MOA, if DC requests, we are allowed to send advanced life support. It's just practically that's not happening very often. I think honestly, in the days that this MOA was created, and I may be slightly off, but if I recall correctly, there was an ambulance at Engine 20 at Tenley Circle, and 31 definitely did not have ALS yet. For the DC folks, the fire station at Pheasantman Street, and it was relatively routine that an ambulance at that point in time from Lanier Place actually came up and serviced Upper Northwest residents. And I'm not trying to serve DC's purpose here, but the lay of the land has changed substantially since then, and our folks are finding that they are getting there at the same time, sometimes slightly before, a lot of times after DC units. And I think that's because of the increase in service in DC and the fact that AMR has taken the load off of a lot of the fire department units. So I think, that's, something we really have to look at, and we really have to make an honest assessment of, based on the current conditions, not based on what was true 20 years ago when this MOA was written. And I would also just emphasize that something that I mentioned before, but we do have new legislative requirements out here, so that anything that we do now is going to require elected official approval in Montgomery County. So, it's something that we have to look at in the future and really get the parties together and figure out what the best, future plans are. But again, just to emphasize, there's no change today, but it is something that we need to look at.
Thank you. This is along the same lines to a degree. I'm not sure if either of you are positioned to answer these, but I'll ask them out of respect to our attendee. I understand that DC has declined to operate a mutual aid agreement with the adjoining Maryland and Virginia counties, Montgomery County, PG, but has an agreement with AMR, a for-profit ambulance service. Do you know why that is?
So we haven't declined to operate a mutual aid agreement. We're signatories to the regional mutual aid agreement, and we do use mutual aid. What we don't do is automatic dispatch of resources. And what we also, what our arrangement with AMR is a third-party transport in order to take the people to the hospital that don't have a life-threatening emergency, but still need to go. Diarrhea, upset stomach after they've been assessed by other people. And what that does is it allows DC Fire and EMS. So our contract works with AMR from 7 in the morning till midnight. And instead of us putting additional DC ambulances in service, we probably need 24 or so to do what they do. It's a cost-saving maneuver, and so we can use the resources as we need them to meet the needs of the community. I don't want to speak for my regional partners, but I don't think that the intent of the mutual aid, I know the intent of the mutual aid agreement is not for DC to not put ambulances or not fund an AMR contract to provide the services the city needs in order to let Montgomery, PG, Fairfax, Arlington provide those services. So we manage AMR very closely, and they are an extension of DC Fire and EMS.
Thank you. And this, you kind of answered this question, but I'll ask it in case there's anything else to add to it. Why are DC taxpayers paying for AMR services instead of using BCCRS, which doesn't charge for its ambulance services?
So I think that our regional mutual aid agreement answer covers that. We have, yeah, there we go.
I agree. There are a couple of other questions that may, one question was, when DC has a citywide emergency, what is the effect on neighborhood response?
So that is a great question. I'll go back to January 6th, because January 6th was both a planned event and a rapidly escalating event, and it used our mutual aid agreement. So because it was a planned event, because the DC government was prepared, we had a number of additional resources and service that allowed us to not pull units from the city, from anybody's neighborhood for the initial part of the response. And that was really important. As the incident escalated, we used our mutual aid partners, got assistance to the scene that bypassed the neighborhood firehouses. So the neighborhood firehouses were not pulled in. And for the first time in a long time, really from Mayor Bowser's investments in our infrastructure, we were able to place additional units in service very rapidly. So we placed in about 16 ambulances and eight fire trucks so that we could continue to respond to the Capitol. We did not lose any services in our communities, and it allows us to respond. So in that, we used mutual aid from 7 jurisdictions. We used our natural ability to use our reserve fleet, and we used a pre-planned ready reserve fleet in order to be able to respond. So I think that's the way we tackle problems. That's the way we look at them. If it had been not a pre-planned event, like a large fire, earlier in the week, we had almost simultaneous 3 fires, all of them beyond the first alarm assignment. And we were able to bring in our extra, because it started during the day. We had our day staff that we were able to up our reserve units with. So I think that's the way we tackle problems. Our goal is never to interfere with our community response. We use a computer-aided module to help us transfer resources around the city if we need to, and recommend mutual aid when it's necessary.
Thank you. One last question, and then
Stephanie,
go ahead.
I would just add that Montgomery County was part of that mutual aid response that Chief Donnelly referred to.
I should have said that. I'm so sorry.
No. I was just going to say, but we intentionally declined participating in the county response to leave more than normal staffing in our station, so that in case any of the the neighborhood firehouses became overwhelmed, that we were still available and we were not downtown at the Capitol. So I just, there's a lot of people thinking about making sure that things work when these things happen.
It's amazing how fast you do all of this behind the scenes.
Well, it's pretty, well, that's because we all know each other. And, on the 6th, my job is to be with the mayor as part of the consequence management team. So that's what I was doing. But simultaneously, I was talking to the region's fire chiefs, and we were coordinating regional response to that. I think it really goes to who we are and what we do.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one last question, and it's a clarifying question. We've thrown around some initials today, and somebody just wanted help defining that. AMR is the ambulance company, correct? Is that who you're...
So AMR is American Medical Response. They are they are a contractor for the District of Columbia.
And was there an acronym AOS that was shared?
That may be from our website. Somebody was looking at the data. AOS has arrived on scene.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we are so grateful to you both, Chief Donnelly and Chief Sherburne. This has been fantastic. We wanted to save time for Samantha Nolan, who is our neighbor and has been looking out for her neighbors for many, many years. So we'll turn it over to you, Samantha, to walk us through some safety guidelines. Would you like me to share my screen now? And you're muted, Samantha.
Not to share yet.
Okay. All right. You let me know when.
All right. I'm going to share this first. While the chiefs are dealing with the emergencies when they happen, all of you know me as the preparedness person. I try to work with crime prevention and also fire prevention. So most people, when they buy a house, one of the first things they purchase is a fire extinguisher. And then they stick it under the kitchen sink or someplace, and 40 years later, somebody might remind them that it's underneath there, but they haven't seen it. So it's really important to take out your fire extinguisher, and there's a gauge on it. And if it's been underneath there for 40 years, it's possible that the arrow is not pointing in the green area, but is pointing in the place that says empty. And you don't want to be in a fire situation with an empty fire extinguisher. So if everybody can tonight take out their fire extinguisher and just check that that's a simple thing that everybody can do, but please check it, make sure it's still working. The next thing is, when there's a fire, is not the time to learn how to use a fire extinguisher. You want to know how to do it ahead of time. So I'm going to go through a very easy way to remember how to work a fire extinguisher, and it's the word PASS, P-A-S-S. So the P is for pulling the pin. There's a pin on it. You need to pull the pin. That's the first thing. The A is aim at the base of the fire. You don't want to aim at the top of the fire, because that can spread your fire across the stove and across your counters and all over. So at the base of the fire, the first S is for squeeze the handle. There's a handle right here. You want to squeeze that handle as you're aiming at the base of the fire, and you want to sweep from side to side. So that's the second S. So pull the pin, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the handle and sweep side to side, pass, P-A-S-S. And Stephanie, you can show them the that visual just so that they'll see that it's on our on the website. It has a good description, and that's available for anyone. You could also look online, and if you just type in how to use a fire extinguisher, it'll come up with a pass technique. So that's fine, and we can stop sharing that now. Thanks, Stephanie. The next thing I wanted to discuss is if you're going to get the file of life, when you fill it out, make a copy and put it in your wallet or in your purse, because you may not be home when you have an emergency. And if the EMS team is trying to decide what are you allergic to, what can they give you, what medications are you taking, it's really important to carry with you a complete list. This is first page is a list of doctors with their phone numbers, what kind of doctors they are. The second page is allergies. And you want to make sure you list all of your allergies on there, medical allergies as well. And then the medications that you're taking, how much you're taking, and how much per day. Carrying that with you. The next thing would be a list of the surgeries you've had and the procedures that you've had. So that's really helpful. They can see if you've recently had surgery and you may be having a reaction to the medication you're taking after the surgery, or you know, they want to know what's gone on in your history. Also on your phone, there's at the bottom of your iPhone, you can tap it, and if it doesn't belong, if the phone is not someone's who can open it, it has the word emergency, and they can hit that emergency. And if you have pre-programmed your phone, you can have all of that information also listed on your phone. There's another area on your phone, there's a little heart here. And if you press that, it also has your immediate information on it. And also EMS can take your phone and put it by your face, and then facial recognition will bring up your information so they can have access to it that way as well. And on your phone, you want to put in under ICE, that's in case of an emergency, and you want to put the person and the phone number of the person you want to have called. That person should have a copy of this information as well, so that if they are your, let's say, power of attorney for healthcare, something very important and everyone should have. And I carry my, my power of attorney for healthcare, a copy of that with me in my purse, along with all these other papers, just in case. It's something else that everyone should think about for their preparedness. We don't know when an emergency is going to happen, but we can plan for them and we can prepare for them. And that's the best tool that we have. So that's my section.
Thank you very much. There is a quick question. I don't know if one of you can just answer before we conclude. At what age should you dispose of a fire extinguisher? And then how do you dispose of an old fire extinguisher?
I'll let the chiefs respond.
And I'm muted. I had the mute problem. The easy answer on how to dispose of it is you take it over to Fort Totten on Saturdays for the community hazardous waste drop off. Two things on there. Each extinguisher is a little different. There should be an expiration on the extinguisher, depending on the type you have. If there isn't one, I probably wouldn't keep it more than 5 years. if there isn't an date on it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much. This has been a fantastic program. I certainly learned a lot. Thank you for giving up a part of your evening to share what you know, and for all the work that you do to keep us safe and well. And thank you for the smile.
Oh, I'm very sorry. I had one more thing on the to-go kit. I forgot to mention the to-go kit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's on the websites as well. If there's an emergency, you need to have in a plastic sealed container specific documents, and that's on the Northwest Neighbors Village website. It's downloaded there, so the members there, Chevy Chase Citizens Association members, this will be up on our website. Our website is getting a complete overhaul, so once it's completed, this will be on there as well. It has things like a flashlight, phone chargers, a change of clothes, 3 days worth of your prescriptions. And every time you change from daylight savings, you should change out your drugs again to keep them up to date. And you need your immunization history. And if you've had your vaccinations and you have your card, first of all, take a picture of that card, make sure it's in the cloud. So if you ever need it and you don't have the card with you, it's available and you can show it. But you wanna be able to show what vaccinations you've had, especially if you've had a tetanus shot, those sorts of things. If you have an emergency, that's the kind of thing you need to know as well. So.
Thank you. Well, I think you've all highlighted the importance of us working together as a community to respond as quickly and as effectively as possible. I want to thank you all for your time and have a wonderful rest of your St. Patrick's Day. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.